With Bitcoin smashing through its previous all-time high before the halving event for the first time ever, it's now looking like Bitcoin could top out sooner than everyone anticipated. But could this result in a double peak cycle for BTC? Today we're going to be looking at the likelihood of a double peak Bitcoin cycle, and where better to start than the MVRV score, which is looking at the Bitcoin realized price as well as its volatility. So the realized price is the average accumulation cost, or the cost basis of all BTC on the network. And what we can see is immediately this has been one of the most accurate metrics in calling Bitcoin peaks and bottoms throughout its entire price history. What we can see from this cycle is we've already rapidly ascended, quicker than we have done in pretty much any other Bitcoin cycle. I think just a few weeks ago, a couple months ago potentially, we were looking pretty similar in terms of pace of acceleration to the upside as the 2015 to 2016, 2017 cycle, where we had this long drawn out period in this buy area before a pretty steady ascent to the upside. And then when we get to the tail end of the bull market, this obviously expands very rapidly. And we were looking fairly similar until probably around 2 months ago in mid to late January when the ETF was launched, where we could see this rapidly expanded to the upside, quicker than we'd usually ever see at this stage in a cycle, which is leading many to believe that potentially we're not going to see a more traditional single peak cycle, something like this 2017 peak we saw here, where Bitcoin has this huge exponential increase in price before the long drawn out bear cycle. And these cycles usually take about 3 or 4 years. If anything, it's looking like we're getting more and more similar to something like this 2013 into 2014 cycle, where we saw this rapid price increase, where price topped out, had quite a stark decline, but over a very short period of time, and actually made a new all-time high in the same single cycle. And we can see from the MVRV score here, this double peak cycle hasn't really occurred since. Many people call the previous bull market a double peak cycle, but that's only because we almost saw 2 separate all-time highs, but at very similar prices. We didn't see this peak, huge drawdown, and then exponential price increase once more. We basically hit the same price twice. And the MVRV score, like we can see, is increasing very rapidly. And if we look at some other metrics here, like the NUPL, it really reiterates this story that we have increased very exponentially. Again, if we look at something like the 2015, 2016, 2017 cycle, we can see this tends to increase and then tail off as the bull market carries on. Somewhat similar in the previous cycle, but due to the huge increase we had and the COVID dump, it kind of warps the data a little bit. But we can see that this kind of had this trend of decreasing, and then as we get towards the tail end of that bull cycle, we see this rapidly increase. But in this earlier cycle here, we see this increase and then rapidly increase, and then we see this double peak once again. And Bitcoin in this cycle was almost doing something similar, where it was tailing off, similar to the previous 2 cycles, but now we're seeing this huge increase almost into the euphoria and greed section before we've even had the halving event. Usually the halving event indicates that we've got 12 to 18 months left of a bull cycle, but already we're seeing signs of Bitcoin's rapid exponential price increases. And if we look at something like the R-HODL ratio, it might actually be something like we saw in the 2013-2014 cycle on this metric, where we don't actually have 2 huge peaks in this sell area. Maybe we have 1 peak, have a little bit of retracement, and then the second peak substantially higher, which might see Bitcoin see prices that we never even thought were possible. If we look at something like the price forecast tools here, and if I just remove all but the delta top here, we can see again, usually Bitcoin just touches this line very briefly. That indicates the Bitcoin peak has happened. Apart from the most recent cycle where we got incredibly close, but not quite there. But in this early cycle here, we saw this rapid increase, touch this line, and then this stayed sideways while Bitcoin's price cooled off, while we retraced a little bit, and then price ran up once again. But I think the best way we can really see how maybe this is looking somewhat similar to a double peak cycle, or maybe at what point we can definitely say for certain that we're looking most likely to see a double peak cycle, is the Puel multiple. We can see we're now at levels that historically have led to a stark decrease in this metric. And this isn't just because of the halving event. We can see the halving event does have a huge impact on this metric, like we saw here, like we'd also see here. But prior to that, we can see Bitcoin's price usually has a little bit of a pullback once the Puel multiple reaches this level. It's happened in pretty much every single cycle. Well, in fact, it has happened in every single cycle. We can see in the previous cycle here, the cycle before that actually happened twice, and then the cycle just prior to that. So if we just zoom in actually on this cycle here, we can see that Bitcoin's price, once it reached this level, went from around $465 down to about $360, so quite a stark decline there. And then this one was just prior to the halving, where Bitcoin's price was $767 at this little peak, and then $527. So we're talking double-digit drawdowns here. So I think if Bitcoin does see quite a stark decline at this point, especially just as we're prior to the halving event, where they usually do see a little bit of a Bitcoin sell-off, maybe if we see something like we saw in previous cycles where this declines just a healthy amount before climbing steadily higher, then that would kind of disprove this double cycle theory. But especially if we see a rapid ascension just before or maybe just after the halving event, substantially above this level into this red cell area that aligns with all the other on-chain metrics we're seeing of very much overbought conditions, that really cements the idea that a double peak cycle is potentially likely for BTC. If we look at something like the Bitcoin cycle master chart here, we can also see that this has correctly called the Bitcoin peak in every single cycle. And this currently sits around $130,000. And if we would see something similar to that 2013-2014 double peak, where we could slightly exceed this red line and then pull back to just this fair market value level here, we could see something where Bitcoin's price runs up in the next few months to this line, which currently sits at 130,000, but by the time we reach it, it may have increased another $10,000, $20,000. We'd retrace to this fair value, which again currently sits around 50,000, but given the fact that this would take a few weeks or months to play out and this is ever increasing, maybe sit about $60,000, $70,000, maybe the previous all-time high. So $130,000 to $140,000, a 50% retracement to the previous all-time high, and that'd set a solid foundation of buy support to maybe get some more buy pressure in, to maybe set a new all-time high in a double peak cycle. Of course, this is all speculation, but like we can see, if we just go to the growth since the cycle lows chart, we can see that this is pretty unprecedented price action. There's always been this theory of diminishing returns and extending lengthening cycles in the Bitcoin price action, but we're actually performing better than we have done in the previous two cycles, which again is something we've just never seen before in the Bitcoin price action. So something like this 2013 into 2014 cycle here may be a possibility. Maybe we top out like if we were to align with this orange cycle here sometime in the coming months, coming weeks maybe, who knows. And then if we were to have an extended drawn out period of a few months, probably a 50% retracement, and then set a new all-time high higher than that would not be something I'd complain about. It'd be definitely something we weren't anticipating, and it really sent Bitcoin to levels that we can only imagine. $140,000 would be the first price target according to the price forecasts and cycle master chart. But then after that drawdown, if we were to regain all-time highs, it's anyone's guess. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. So just to summarize, for the first time in Bitcoin's entire history, we've surpassed the previous cycle all-time high prior to the Bitcoin halving event, which is scheduled about 3 weeks away from now. And previously it seemed this cycle was most comparable to the 2016-2017 cycle, where we had that huge exponential run-up, but the cycle was actually a fairly long, steady growth cycle. But there are now many similarities with Bitcoin's previous double peak cycle from 2012 to 2014. And there are now a number of on-chain metrics that are currently showing comparable levels to where Bitcoin's mid-cycle corrections have occurred. Like we could see with the Puer multiple, this is a really critical area and region for BTC's price action and its health according to multiple on-chain metrics. So if we do see a bit of a stark decline, especially as we're around the halving event and we're maybe anticipating a little bit more of a pullback, then that would maybe disprove the double cycle theory. But if we are to set continuously new all-time highs and Bitcoin's price runs up to exponentially high levels, maybe we do see a double peak cycle. So especially over the next few weeks and months, it'll be really critical to watch how Bitcoin reacts. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to professional resolution charts, advanced macro and portfolio data tools, in-depth crypto industry reports, live and personalized indicator alerts, private TradingView scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on the potential of a Bitcoin double peak cycle. Do you think that's most likely, or do you think we're going to have a more traditional single peak exponential run-up cycle? As I said, let me know down in the comments and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.